Yes, so we are live.
A very good evening to each one of you. Welcome to yet another enriching panel discussion in continuation of the thematic panel series Across the Table as part of the Department of Science and Technology, Track 1 Public Consultation for India's Science, Technology and Innovation Policy 2020, in short, STIP 2020. This is the fourth such webinar in a series of 15 that the Science Policy Forum brings to you. To the ones who have newly joined us this evening, welcome to the League. This evening, we discuss an extremely important theme that finds its way right to the title of the policy itself. Please put down your thoughts, comments, and questions, and remember the hashtag AskSTIP2020 Innovation. And we will get them straight to our panelists. We're extremely privileged to have an illustrious panel, interested viewers, and an inspiring team behind this unique initiative. I, Janice Govius from the Science Policy Forum, along with Mr. Rajiv Mishra from the Center for Studies in Science Policy, JNU, take the privilege to moderate this session. I acknowledge the efforts of Mr. Aditya Kaushik, the Deputy Director of Sustainable Water Future Program at IISc Bangalore, who is our back-end host for this program. The discussion today is divided into two rounds. In the first 45 minutes, we will be hearing from our panelists on the relevance of innovation in the context of STIP 2020. Followed by a round of answering intriguing questions by you audience, which are posted on various social media handles and from our wonderful live audience here, who will be posting it on the chat. Please remember the hashtag again, AskSTIP2020 Innovation. Well, first things first, let's take the privilege to introduce to you our esteemed panel consisting of Dr. Ayesha Chaudhary. She's the program director and member of the founding team at the Atal Innovation Mission Niti Aayog at the Government of India. Her professional experience ranges from academia to starting her own medtech venture to the corporate sector and finally right to the Government of India in design, development and implementation of high impact and affordable science and technology solutions. Currently, she leads one of the flagship initiatives of the Government of India working towards designing and implementing innovation and entrepreneurial policies and programs for India. Her philosophy of life is very interesting. Keep challenging yourself to learn and evolve as an individual. She has received several awards that include the MIT Award, Innovator Under 35, and Your Story 100 Emerging Voices of 2018, to name a few. Dr. Ayesha Chaudhary, thank you for being here with us today. Our second panelist is Dr. Taslimarif Saiyed, Director and CEO, Center for Cellular and Molecular Platforms, Bangalore. He is actively involved in promoting innovation in life sciences, healthcare, by supporting translation of discoveries to application, entrepreneurship, and technology development. He has a PhD in neurosciences from the Max Planck Institute for Brain Research, Germany, and obtained a postdoctoral training at the University of California, San Francisco, along with training and management for biotech and innovation. He also served as a consultant for many biotech firms in the US. He is an adjunct faculty at IIT Madras and at the Amrita University. Dr. Saiyed, a warm welcome to you. And last but not the least, we have with us a very enterprising Sijo Kuruvilla George, referred to as the mega mind behind the treasure trove in Cochin. He's the founding CEO of Startup Village, India's first public-private partnership technology business incubator. He's also the co-founder of MobMe, one of the first student startups from the state of Kerala. With wide experience in entrepreneurship and management consulting, his words have served as one of the strongest catalysts for the student entrepreneurship to transform ideas into possibilities. The right person here with us this evening, we have all three of them very illustrious. In addition, Dr. Sijo, he also served as a consultant to the Kerala Startup Mission. He has been invited to the International Visitor Leadership Forum and the prestigious Professional Exchange Program of the Department of State, USA. His list of achievements go on. We will know more about him, but dear sir, welcome. We are very glad that you are here this evening. Having revealed our illustrious panel, I once again invite our audience to keep posting your questions on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Remember the hashtag AskSTIP2020 Innovation. We would also prefer if you would mention your name and place, and we will try to bring it up to our speakers today. That being said, I now invite yet another very important person, Dr. Chagun Basha, Senior Technical Specialist at the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, to brief us on today's activity. Over to you, Chagun.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before anything, I just want to say, if somebody calls you very important, just make sure that's the biggest trap for you. So with that said, I'm really glad that the individuals that are here in this panel today, Ayesha, Taslimarif, and Sijo, although we have established connections through virtual platforms, we never got a chance to formally get introduced and have interactions. But I'm glad that we are all on board for this policy, and it makes it more inclusive and vibrant. And I'm really looking forward to the discussions today on this very important topic. The reason that I want to jump in here is to make sure the context is set for this public panel. Although the policy process is running parallelly in various tracks that many of us already know, not just the panelists and the members, but also the audience, that there are 4 tracks, and track 1 is the extended public and expert consultation process. And track 2 is the focused experts-driven drafting process of the policy. The idea behind having this thematic public panel series is to bridge the tracks so that the larger set of voices come through this public panel discussion and public interaction with our expert members who are part of our track 2 drafting process. Aisha, Taslim, and Sijo, all 3 of them are part of our track 2 drafting process as experts in different groups, and particularly related to innovation and entrepreneurship. And also they will be contributing long in formulating and setting up the draft of this policy. So this is an opportunity for the larger pool of people to come up with their ideas, thoughts, and questions, to engage with these experts, and to also reflect on various issues of innovation and entrepreneurship, and bring this up to the policy making process. So that being said, I'm really looking forward to not just questions and comments in this panel, but also ideas from participants which can be debated on this platform, and that can be reflected into the track 2 drafting process. With that, welcome you all again, and thanks for being with us. I'll hand it over to Janice now to conduct the session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Janice and Shagun, for setting the wonderful tone of this panel discussion and giving a very wonderful introduction about all the 3 speakers and the larger, broader idea behind this effort, which Shagun mentioned. So without any further delay, I just want to start the panel discussion by inviting our first speaker, Dr. Ayesha Chaudhary, as she's working with the government, a very premier policy institution, Niti Aayog, and especially in Atal Innovation Mission. So you'll be knowing a lot about innovation entrepreneurship. So over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Rajiv. Thanks, Shagun, Janice, all of you, and of course, a very good evening to all the audiences and the panelists. I think you guys have done a brilliant job in putting all of this together. And like Shagun said, we have been involved for the past month or so, and it's evolving very nicely, very beautifully. The way you have been trying to do it bottom up, I think that's the real key this time, and that is what is really going to differentiate this policy from the rest of the attempts in the past. So what I really want to highlight now is that essentially one fundamental point that, we usually, when we grow up in schools or in colleges, we have this mindset that, oh, innovators and entrepreneurs are sort of born, how can I also become an innovator or an entrepreneur, whether it is science technology based or it is digital technology based innovation. So what I want to highlight is that entrepreneurship is both a mindset and a skill set that we all can develop. In fact, research has demonstrated that only 1/3 of the skills are genetic. The remaining 2/3 can be learned by observation and practice. So I think what is important is that for all of us is to be able to believe in ourselves, and the fact that yes, we all can be innovators, and one can innovate in any age, whether you are extremely young at school or you are in college or even when you are in the middle of your profession. The aspect is that how do you really start observing problems around yourself? What is it that really inspires you, motivates you? What kind of scientific challenges inspire you? And then how do you really go about the process? And today there are so many different kinds of tools and technologies that are available using which you can follow a process and also understand how to systematically at least start innovating and then of course flare it out based on the specific problem. The second aspect that I want to highlight is that, integrating scientific innovation with our lives creates both impact and profit. In fact, over the last several decades, independent thinkers have been hypothesizing and presenting different theories for India's lag in science driven innovation. However, what I want to highlight is that the present COVID-19 pandemic is really transforming this and bringing us closer, despite all the kinds of territorial boundaries that are being created. It is motivating our scientific enterprise to adopting new behaviors by choosing collaboration over competition and converting individual brilliance into collective performance. So therefore, I guess the very second important point is that COVID-19 pandemic is like a wake-up call for us to reformat our scientific enterprise. And in my mind, it is imperative that only increasing the spend in R&D in scientific research alone will not lead us to better technology outcomes, as it has always been anticipated in a linear approach to science technology innovation. Instead, what we really need is a systems approach which is focused on structures, incentives, processes, and a culture that allows measurement and management of science, which in turn will improve the overall return on science in investment. So I think the two broad messages that I would like to leave our audiences is with that anyone and everyone can innovate and become a scientific entrepreneur if you get the right sort of training. And second, the present scenario can still be leveraged as an opportunity for us to be able to reformat our scientific enterprise and really leverage on the scientific enterprise that we have built in the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, for the very brief and wonderful insight which you gave, talking about things from the bottom up and also about the current scenario. Certainly, we have seen in current times how household innovation is being done to tackle COVID, whether it's making masks or other stuff. So definitely some of the things which you said is very relevant, very interesting. So now I would like to invite our second speaker, Professor Taslimarif Saiyed, for sharing his insight about innovation and entrepreneurship. Working in a scientific organization, I'm sure he would bring some very valuable insights. Over to you, sir.
That is driven by. I must unmute 1 second. I think I have to get it right, muting and unmuting. Sorry about that. But let me begin again. So thank you so much, first of all. I think it's a very exciting initiative that is being worked together by very young professionals and very passionate under the able leadership of the DST and PSA office. I think it's very, very important. As I think it was mentioned in the introduction, I think this is a very important sector broadly in terms of innovation entrepreneurship. And if I may say so, I think if we see going forward, I think if we want to build a knowledge-based economy and a knowledge-based long-term system, we have to build innovations from ground up. I think it's very crucial that we do that. Economies could be of various kind. It could be service-based economy, it could be other manufacturing-based economies, and so on. Very important aspect that can we build a knowledge-based and innovation-based economy. And for that, building innovations would be one of the key things that we all have to do. And some of us who are involved in it would be an important aspect. How do we do that? What are the best vehicles to do that? And entrepreneurship is one of the best vehicles to actually take interesting ideas and take them towards an impact, which actually is building an innovation. So that's actually very, very important. That's where I think this team, if you want to put this together, one, entrepreneurship is a vehicle, innovation is an impact that actually could be useful, and application could be useful for somebody. And I think that convergence of both is actually very, very crucial. It should not be looked in silo. It is interdependent, and something should be done together. If I may now bring the scientific aspect of it. So what we do at CCAMP, I work at CCAMP, that is in Bangalore. We actually look at this as entrepreneurship as a vehicle, science as the source, deep science as the source, and innovation as an impact, which can actually be useful to the society. So you utilize your raw material or resource, that is science, scientific knowledge, use entrepreneurship as a vehicle, and build cutting edge innovations that is impactful to the larger public, which is going to be very, very crucial. And if we build those such instruments together across India of taking science through the entrepreneurship vehicle towards its impact, that is innovation, that will be very, very useful. And this is something that we are seeing right in last 2 to 3 months in the COVID pandemic. I do not want to take much time, but I'll be happy to elaborate. And in the times when actually we found that we are possibly largely unequipped because the unavailability of resources, healthcare resources from international geographies, we actually looked in our own backyard and found that some of the possibilities that could be converted into deployable innovations, which actually have come handy. And that is something that is very, very interesting phenomena which has happened in the last 3 months across India. I'll be happy to elaborate it, but I think I will possibly stop my first introductory remarks to say that innovation is the way to go for India. I think we have phenomenal talent. We actually have good scientific investment and temperament. I think we have to take that knowledge, build on a vehicle of the entrepreneurship, and have impactful innovation as an outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Saiyed. Very brief and very insightful, very nuanced take on innovation, entrepreneurship, current challenges, and past experiences. Definitely, it will help to provoke a lot of thoughts from our audience to get some more questions. So now, heading over to the last panelist of today's panel discussion, I'd like to invite Mr. Sijo Kuruvilla George, who would definitely bring a different kind of a perspective, working in history in startups, incubators. So I would like to hand over the last topic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajiv. So in terms of a couple of opening comments in terms of how I would want to bring the context here. World over, if you look at various literature, and essentially, in some sense, that is sort of the path we took in Startup Village also. Predominantly, if you look at it, there are two factors which will actually tilt the scale of innovation. One is where there is a sizable number of talent tinkering with it, tinker with various ideas and thoughts and everything. But most critically, if you break it down, one of the biggest determinants of increasing innovation or innovation quotient is by bringing down the cost of experimentation. And how do you systematically go about doing that, either at institutional level or a policy level or at a cultural level, is essentially the hat I would want to wear when I look from how we want to encourage or bring in more S&T entrepreneurship into the country. So just as bringing it together, right? So one of the first, when we did Startup Village, our motto was build, break, innovate, which again ties back to the cost of experimentation. And some of you might be able to relate to that. In most of academic institutions in which we came up, if you have tried accessing a projector from a college department, it's typically a very bureaucratic work. You can't really damage it. You'll have to be very careful of it. And the general idea is that if you give it to kids, they're gonna break it. So keep everything locked is the general phenomenon. But if you really need to inculcate the temperament or inculcate the culture of entrepreneurship or innovation for that matter, the analogy I'll have in mind is the VCR in most of our homes during our growing up years. So we used to play around with it. We open under the hood. We play, we actually get a thrill of excitement. So you should be allowed to break things. And how do you create such a environment where the cost of experimentation is increasingly lower is the filter I would typically look at any innovation ecosystem. And one of the reasons why, if you look at specific sectors, right, let's say the computing fields or the information technology field, we're actually being a lot of innovation happening because of the fact that the cost of experiment is very low, and the threshold of changing ideas and trying out things is also very low. So this becomes the filter for me. And if you look at world over, building 6 in Stanford, world over, people have created informal environments to actually create the same effect as well. So how do you consistently keep bringing down the cost of experimentation becomes one filter for me to look at it. And in a country like India, the cultural aspects of trying out that is also very significant, which needs merit and attention. Half the time when we go to colleges or speak to students and young founders, typically one of the biggest questions is it's not exactly where you get funding. Most of the questions are around how do I convince my parents, how do I convince my friends if I want to do something like that. So that social and cultural aspect should not go unnoticed, at least in a country like India. So primarily that is one area. The second point I would want to bring about, especially from the focus of the area that I've worked with, the audience that I've worked with. Traditionally, we have all focused on having that perfect idea, which can be taken to scale or success in the market. But what our realization has been, that stems from our own story as well as student entrepreneurs ourselves. Our initial ideas were sort of crappy. It was not the perfect idea, but ideas also evolve as a function of exposure. So if you want to get a lot more youngsters participate in this particular thing, equally important is to provide systems to provide or mechanisms or programs or ability to provide, along with advocacy, the exposure that they need to start playing around with more and more ideas. So the quality of your exposure drives the quality of your ideas. And three, significantly, I'd repeat this again and again, it has to be fun. So it again goes back to cost of experimentation. You want to play around with it. And if you look at global innovation systems around the world, even if a laboratory system or in a garage, the need to tinker or the excitement to tinker has been one of the biggest driving forces, at least in the starting phases of it. So these would be the way I would probably look at it. A couple of tactical suggestions in terms of how I would, now that I reflect over. We have had a lot of conversations about bringing entrepreneurship literature or entrepreneurship education in academia, either in parts of courses, even in schools or colleges and stuff like that. What I would probably love to see is maybe going a couple of more concepts deeper in terms of having some modules around economics or psychology, or mostly some conversations around wealth creation, because that is the heart of entrepreneurship. And these are some of the topics or modules which could be looked at from a early, let's say, early education perspective. And when I look at various, let's say, syllabus and everything, the predominantly followed syllabus in India, which is the CBSE or the state syllabuses, shortchange those elements of psychology or economics. I'm not saying it should be elaborate, but even in part, those elements would be great. And when I look at some of the NIS or syllabus, those options are there. So this would be my way of looking at it. But the key converging point I'd like to say is, and this is where at sometimes from a policy focus or from a institutional focus, we keep missing out. At the heart of it, the most important input asset or the input variable is the entrepreneur. And I would probably want to recall a quote from this gentleman called Paul Graham. So if you keep the entrepreneur alive and motivated for the longest period of time, it's inevitable that they'll succeed. So how do we keep attract the talent to start working on ideas? How do you create such nurturing environments? Would be more of the hat I would probably look at it. And I see some of the questions around what could be the areas of policy should keep looking at it. And these elements of how do we create such open systems, and more critically, how to keep bringing on cost of experimentation to truly bring in democratization is the way for us to start looking at it. And all the more in a country like India, I saw the question also from coming up from various quarters, or the feedback. The role of language and relatable role models is a lot more needed and higher in a country as diverse, as interesting as India. So this will be my opening thoughts in terms of how I would think about bringing to the table the thoughts. Over to you, Rajiv.
Thanks, Sijo, for that really, I would say, power-packed talk. A lot of things, very insightful things. And I think there are a lot of things which all three of the panelists have touched are very kind of similar in views about tinkering, talent, bottom-up approach, about resources. So I hope that there would be some really good discussion which would be following. So before I hand over opening of the Q&A session, I'd like to again remind to our audience that we have our live feed. So please post your questions in Facebook, Twitter, YouTube live chat, and there is a hashtag which is called #AskSTIP2020 Innovation. So we also have our social media coordinators, Siddharth and Ashwini, who are coordinating, so they can pass those questions to us. So thank you both for that effort again. So now, as we had some introductory thoughts on the topic by three of the panelists, we'll be opening our Q&A session over to you, Janice.
Thank you, Rajiv. It was wonderful to hear all three of our panelists talking about innovation. But I felt very sad for Dr. Taslim because he thought he did not have enough time. But Dr. Saiyed, not to worry, the first question is on COVID itself. And again, no prizes for guessing whom this question is going to be directed to. So, Professor Taslimarif Saiyed, here is a question on COVID. How has India progressed in innovation in the healthcare sector? What do you think are the major challenges in healthcare innovation, especially during this time of COVID-19? Over to you, sir.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Janice. I think I just wanted to be brief, and I was not stopped by you for sure to not give too much of detail, but it was my one effort to not get into many. But okay, so coming back to questions. I think if I got the question right, question had two parts. One part is that how is the healthcare innovation ecosystem in India is doing, and if you put the context of COVID-19. I think India, I think one of the good things that India has done over the last few years and rather even decades has been to actually invest in science. That is a very, very good, important aspect that we have actually done over many, many, many years, and all kinds of science. What that has resulted into actually a very good scientific infrastructure, scientific human resource, and many other scientific assets that are there. And slowly I'm coming to the question actually. And last 10 years rather has actually, in terms of healthcare, has been a phenomena in terms of how healthcare innovation has begun and shown potential. So last 10 years, very exciting science is being done, very exciting innovations aspect is done. We have phenomenal, very, very risky deep science ideas being attempted. And few of them have been very successful. I'll give you a few examples who have been successful. Like we are one of the best ones right now in terms of attempting new antibiotics for the global challenge of antimicrobial resistance, the superbug phenomena that we all know about. Very, very well, which actually have impact in infectious diseases the way we see. And those have been all built in. Now come one aspect, come COVID-19, and as I mentioned, we realized that when we did not have the readily available COVID-19 testing kits or the ventilators or disinfecting devices and so on, when we looked in our own backyard, we found that the early shooting of innovations, healthcare innovations were around us. The only missing link, and I'm intentionally saying it missing link, most of those efforts were like half marathons. The early stage innovations were done, and what we need is a full marathon. So what actually happened is that in last 3 months, a lot of half marathon winners have become full marathon winners. What it means is that a lot of phenomenal technology developing innovators have actually now have products into market. That is two different things. One is to develop a technology, another is to put the product into market. And there's a journey between that. In last 3 months, because we did not have other products to support us from international geographies, our half-baked, half innovations actually have pushed the boundaries. There's a lot of collaborations that have happened between academia, industry, regulatory, government, and startups. And actually a lot of those products have come to market. And one of the effort that CCAM did, I'll just tell you very briefly, called COVID-19 Innovations Deployment Accelerator, was exactly to pick this nearly deployment ready innovations and see how we can help. You'll be surprised. A month we got 1,100 innovation submission, 1,100, and when we actually brought it down to top 30 most impactful innovations, out of 30 now 18 are in the field serving people around us, and that is what I said that converting half marathon winners to a full marathon winners now, and that is something very important thing that has happened in India. The crucial aspect would be in terms of healthcare innovation is that how can we keep this momentum alive? How can we build on this momentum and not let it happen only a crisis response? We have done well in crisis, not necessarily completely well, but we have to keep this momentum alive, make sure that we learn what worked for us, because every infrastructure, every ecosystem is different, what worked for us, and build on it and take it forward. So I think we are in a very good trajectory in terms of building healthcare innovation. In a way, this adversity is actually an opportunity for healthcare innovators from India to actually say, we also can do it. We don't need to have medical devices from international geography. We can do it at the highest quality. And this is an opportunity they have latched upon. Now, what we need to do is to have a long-term view of this. I'll stop here and happy to expand on it. I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Said, that was very well said. It's a very innovative comparison of half marathon and full marathon. I think, just like you said, necessity is the mother of invention, and we've seen a lot of innovative ideas and inventions coming up because of the necessity. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Said. That was wonderful. We'll move on to the next question. Rajiv?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So the next question is to Dr. Ayesha Chaudhary. And I think when she was speaking, she also mentioned about collaboration and scientific challenges. So I think this question kind of pertains to the point which she briefly highlighted, that the question is, university/academia-based incubators have gained focus as a launch platform for both entrepreneurs and innovation. How can they be strengthened? So this questions the aspect of collaboration and how it can be strengthened.
Yeah, thanks Rajiv for the question. And like you said, in fact, I'll try and build on what Taslim also said, that how we have to be able to leverage this crisis as an opportunity, and how do we really, how our strength lies in, maximizing the opportunity and the ability to be able to continuously innovate on the likes of Darwinism and for the survival of the fittest. So yes, like we have been hearing that there are lots of incubators and accelerators and similar programs that have been supported by the government. But what again has been missing is the link for these incubators or startups with the industry, with the end user, with the market. So again, the challenge is that how do we really get them to interact with each other? How do we really drive that behavioral change? Now, again, the unique thing is that in the past 3 to 4 months, we have seen some very beautiful and extraordinary examples of coordination between the industry, the academia, and the government. In fact, the launch of, I would say, the Arogya Setu app in itself is such an example where the private sector came forward, worked day and night with the academic people and with the government. So that is a beautiful collaboration example. Now, this is a sea shift change that we are observing across the spectrum, I would say. And our challenge is to ensure that how we can make this a rule and not an exception, and how does it really continue beyond the pandemic also. And that's where I feel that, the science, technology, innovation policy is going to play a very, very significant role, because now it is the right time to leverage the momentum, continue the connections that we have built, strengthen those connections. And how do we really introduce further structural and policy reforms through this science, technology, innovation policy? And I think that is where, again, this is a perfect timing. How do we lay down certain guiding principles of, say, speed, transparency, clarity, and consistency that we have seen in the last 3 to 4 months? And then how do we really evolve our system? So in my mind, I would say that if we can really come out with a very strong and robust policy and also have a good, robust governing mechanism, This policy will really address the bottleneck issues of creating substantial and flexible funding models for the deep science and technology. It will help us to enable technology de-risking for our entrepreneurs, which is still a bottleneck, though we do have a lot of incubators. But again, where we are not able to really perform is that how do we take these technologies from the science academia into a late stage technology which is ready to be launched into the market. So that entire de-risking of technology is another key goal that we can achieve through this new science technology policy that we are evolving. Then how do we also are able to provide the market access to these technology entrepreneurs and enable a cluster approach at the ecosystem level where, like I said, the institutions come together, work with each other for a larger mission, for a larger goal, keeping aside their own individual personal goals. So I guess in my mind, we can leverage this time, this opportunity of developing the new policy to really evolve our model for national security also and rapidly transition to a state of what I call as self-sufficiency for scientific research, development, design, technology, and manufacturing, and thereby align all of that to also the nation's mission of creating an Atmanirbhar Bharat. So I think that is how we have to continue to build on the momentum and see where we can really evolve our ecosystem too, using collaboration. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ayesha. I think you ended with Atmanirbhar, and Atmanirbhar is impossible without entrepreneurship. We have one very interested person here who is very much interested in entrepreneurship. Sushmita Ghosh, I'm sure she's listening right now. The question, I think I would address it to Sijo because he's the right person to answer any question on entrepreneurship, especially from a young person like Sushmita who wants to become a budding entrepreneur. So her question is, she says, despite of all innovation, why is our country gradually being, continuously, why are they importing stuff? And secondly, what she wants to know is she's worried that entrepreneurs have to work 24/7. And she's saying successful entrepreneurs are today giving up their entrepreneurial venture and going towards salary jobs. So she's really worried. I think, Sijo, you have to address this issue.
Sure. So, couple of quick points there. So let me address one of the points that entrepreneurs have to work 24/7. See, there are a lot of myths around entrepreneurship. A lot of them are, very great stories. So let's say the most attractive story about entrepreneurship is overnight success. And if you really talk to entrepreneurs or founders who have done it and got to a point of, let's say, good success, they will typically say that 10 years went into creating an overnight success, right? In a similar manner, I would put working 24/7 into, let's say, one of those stories which actually go on to do a lot of feel good and stuff like that. And if I were to actually probably take a step back, right, I would probably say people on the government side of things actually work way more than most entrepreneurs do. But it doesn't probably get that much courage and everything. But the other side of the worry, I would like to address this. See, at the heart of it, entrepreneurship with the whole startup movement is also a bit of a counterculture movement against the way work is organized, life is organized, and how would you like to improve and change the world? And from that standpoint, on one side, we could go into these kinds of stories, but on the other side, I'd also like to explore different examples. Most companies, try out and come up with new and innovative culture or HR policies. I know companies which have a 4-day work week. I know companies who have a complete travel policies. They have a travel vacation, so they actually give you a budget to travel, and it's mandatory to travel. Now, these are not exactly the kind of things that you would look at saying that it's a 24/7 kind of job. So what I would say is the difference between working in a company or being employed and being an entrepreneur is not the number of hours you put in. It's the kind of mind share that takes you. So constantly, it's like, it's your own project, it's your own baby. So the time boundary sort of changed, saying that my mind share is mostly going to take care of my company and everything. So I wouldn't be too worried about the 24/7 sort of a scenario. And if you do love it, you'll also actually have a lot of fun as well. I remember this one quote which came up a long time back. There are 3 very addictive things. So one is, let's say, one is carbohydrates, and third one was a monthly paycheck. But somewhere I don't see people having, mentioning entrepreneurship or doing a startup on your own there. Try it; it's way more addictive, and that's the reason why most people put in the 24 hours. It's not because someone asks you to. So that's the first part of the story. People going back to industry. I'm not sure what is the quoting of the data. Interestingly, wherever I've seen increasingly successful entrepreneurs, yes, in some instance, they've gone back to industry to actually say that I have a bigger opportunity. But more often than not, they have gone on to support and back other ventures, either as angel investors or as mentors and advisors. That's been by and far the phenomenon I've seen. But just to make one point to allay another set of concerns, where most of the, especially when you're young, you have concerns if you try something out, what if it fails? So let's say a long time back when the private sector was not as developed as it is, and there was a lot of cultural perceptions around a failed entrepreneur. Today, given that there are a lot more startups who are doing, the Flipkarts of the world and everything are there is a lot more value attached to a talent who has tried something out, who brings entrepreneurial skills to the table. So the good thing is, if you look at the current environment, even if you try out something and actually doesn't really work from the classic success standpoint, you still have way more options in the industry where you can actually take a break, take a few years, pick up your skills, pick up your networks, and again come back and do it all over again. So as against the movement between, let's say, employment and entrepreneurship as a negative factor, I would probably say it's a positive opportunity that we all have to move in that particular direction. And overall, I would say, this gets played out on a 15, 20-year horizon. You want to start up again, you will come back and you will take a break in between, and you will come back and start all over again. So it's getting used to that process and that skill and the network, which is more critical early on. So that would be allaying the fears part of it. Can I just request, what are the first question, the first part of the question? Indigenization, right? I was still exporting a lot of stuff. There are tons of factors, macro and micro, but I will probably give a more, let's say, a small targeted request or a suggestion to the participant here in her own way to start making a change in that particular dimension. So if you look at the way all of us learn these days, predominantly we start learning by searching online. We learn through YouTube videos, we learn through blog articles, we learn through Wikipedia. Now, if you look at it, most of this content that we use for learning either code or other instruction manual or other technology or skills, a large amount of them are actually created not by people who are from India, right? If you look at the participation of Indian youth professionals on Wikipedia as a platform, the number is abysmally low. It doesn't justify that a country of 1 billion plus, which has such a a huge demographic dividend advantage, is not contributing on that. And all it takes is actually take up your laptop, create ID, and start typing away. So each of us can actually start taking small things. So I'd suggest start contributing in Wikipedia immediately. Start creating. So if you have used a tutorial to learn something, you can immediately start creating tutorials of your own. And good thing is there are platforms that actually make it super easy and super fun. And in due course, you're also picking up skills and how to contribute in this particular scenario. So this is one way to look at it. The other aspect, if you look at from a macro perspective, given the status of the country, the percentage of or the quantum of money or the percentage of GDP that you're able to commit to, let's say, more R&D based projects where we can start creating IP. That share has only been increasing over a period of time, and we still have a long way to go. And the promising fact I would like to point here is a lot of focus is actually going into such areas and such initiative, making sure that there's a lot more government grants and funding available for high-risk investments. So as Dr. Ayesha mentioned, there's a lot of focus. There's a lot of progress in the last 10 years between the coordination between academia, industry, and government and everything. A lot of it is getting addressed. We still have come a long way forward as compared to where we were in 2010 or 2000s. And we'll still continue to make that much. So I would still leave it on a positive note. There are areas where each of us as individuals can affect change in terms of bringing about a change in that reality. A lot of initiatives are being done at the government, at the policy level. which is beginning to show fruit. Today, India has about 20 unicorns even from the market perspective. 15, 20 years back, we didn't really have that initiator, and we are still on the verge of growing to a $5 trillion economy. And on the last part, as against be concerned about we have to go 24/7, or people are going back to industry, think from a different hat and realize that, hey, this is actually interesting to the point where you would want to work 24/7. It's similar to the college festival that you were part of back in college to organize. We stayed up all night, not because we had to, because we love doing that. And that's the essence of why most founders do and spend that kind of time. And the industry being around gives us a good safety net, and also a way to actually pick up skills and exposure and expertise and even capital and networks. And these are the ways, if you change the hat, you can turn those into really, really good assets and stepping stones to extend the entrepreneurship journey. Over to you, Janice.
Yeah, thanks, Sijo. I think we have two more questions which kind of pour out from some of the things which you just said. Some of the aspects of investments which you talked. So one question which we have from the live feed and on the pre-curated question. So it's about often we find that the innovators, whether it's in academia or in other places, they struggle to steer the technological idea or the design to the market. And one of the reasons is also investment or financing of it, right? So in what ways you think government can assure effective utilization of management of like business insights in startups, and that in a way could lead to a sustainable model of accelerators or incubators? So the whole financing and investment of innovative ideas from universities, whether it's from a scientist or a student coming from an engineering college. Yeah, up to you.
Your microphone is muted, Sijo, I think.
Yes, it was muted. Thanks for that. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So Rajiv, to answer your question, Rajiv, I actually have a lot of positive factors to convey on the specific question that you asked. So I would broadly put it in three buckets, right? The stages of funding. And there is one stage of funding which is, let's say, at an idea level, where tinkering your product opportunity from a standpoint not exactly proven. And if you look at a student or a young innovator, that quantum is somewhere around 5 to 10 lakhs is good enough to sustain for a year, right? And unless there are specific, let's say, hardware or infrastructure that is needed, the great thing is there are a lot of incubators and a lot of grant programs, and incubators facilitate those programs as well. So if you keep that particular quantum there are a lot of schemes in the government. I can talk about the BIRAC schemes and everything, which is also very well popularized. But I would try to probably shed light on some other new things that have happened. Maybe those could be directions of policy. There was an idea grant policy that was actually created in Kerala government, where if you are a student innovator, if you want to tinker around with the project, you will be given up to 12 lakhs of capital, 2 lakhs initially if you have a concept idea. If you develop a prototype, you give an additional 5 lakhs, and up to a 10 lakh with very, very small milestones to be hit as a way to inculcate it. Now, this was actually an evidence-based example, because what happened was that around the time the Startup Village happened, we actually had a lot of instances where we used to have students come up and say that, hey, I have this concept which I want to try out. Will you be willing to give me 10,000s? So, and on a case-to-case basis, we used to give out this very, very small micro grant, so to speak. This wouldn't qualify from a larger industry perspective. And we advocate the government that if you really want to bring in a lot more youngsters, we should have a very, very different sort of a scheme there. And the idea grant, the idea scheme actually came out of that, which has resulted in a lot more innovators, a lot more students coming and trying out their own projects. And we got some fascinating concepts there. So that is stage one. So there's a lot of positive things happening there. And one thing I would love to say that, which I've not seen yet translated into government policy. In one college, this translated into the alumnus of the college, alumni coming in and giving matching contributions to any project that used to be getting funded under this particular scheme. So this will start creating multiplier effect, both in terms of capital, but more than capital, it's actually the kind of people that can help you that create the difference. So on the earlier stage, this is where government can really start focusing on. That 2 to 5 lakhs is a very, very required as a grant level at an idea level. The second space I would probably say is the angel space. It's a more of an awareness issue, Rajiv. So around the time that, let's say, I also graduated, We also did not really know a lot about financing, investments, how it works and stuff like that. And it was very difficult to actually even get that information. So a lot of it actually goes down to getting the right access and the guidance. But if I compare back in 2005, around the time that I graduated, and right now, your availability of capital has grown manifold from a private sector participation. You have platforms like Let's Venture, Indian Angel Network, Angel List, and hosts of networks across various cities. So the role of private capital has actually grown a lot, and these are very interesting numbers. I've seen 2 crore to 5 crore angel rounds closing in less than 24 hours, and this is not a one-off phenomenon. But if you talk to most youngsters, most young innovators, they are not aware that such platforms exist. That cup to lip is an area where a lot of advocacy initiatives need to go in. We try to do a lot of that around, let's say, creating content like this. We do knowledge series sessions and evangelize about how doing that. But if you look at the numbers, every month, 30 to 50 angel deals have been happening in India over the last 5 years. And the average ticket size is 2 to 5 crores, right? And this number has stayed constant over the last 5 years. Even during COVID times, the number when it went down, it did not go down to zero. It still is hovering around 5 to 10 a month. But it means that there is tremendous appetite and tremendous private capital available. So there I only have positive news. Maybe the government does not really need to play a lot of funding role, but the government needs to probably play a more proactive facilitator role in terms of making sure the policies are a lot more aligned to make it much more easier for these private individuals to come and do these angel investments. And if you go to the regulatory aspect, there are ESOPs or let's say the financing part of it and stuff like that. Without going into regulatory, so that is where the government can shift focus because private market participation has actually gone up a lot. Converting them into success is a lot of mentoring that happens over a 3 to 5 year timeline. And again, if I want to communicate to you, Dr. Ayesha mentioned a lot of incubators are happening and where the incubator models are shifting towards. Predominantly, traditionally, incubator models in India were structured around governments providing grants. But if I take examples like, there's an accelerator called Upeka, they are a SaaS accelerator. It's like the Lambda schools where they actually work free or almost on a share of outcome basis. So high quality mentoring is also accessible for these students or youngsters or young innovators. And the challenge which I have seen mostly is also to ensure that this knowledge is accessible to all these students or young innovators. And communities and IETC centers play a large role there. There needs to be an overhaul in how we look at running some of these programs. This COVID impacted business reality does give a very, very great opportunity for us to break geographies and start doing digitally. So these would be the areas I would want to focus on. There is a wealth of literature, and I'll again close on a positive note. Almost all these new generation founders have been very forthcoming in sharing information, publishing it. I can at least directly show you 5 articles where founders have open sourced their whole fundraising process. This was my first deck. This was my last deck. This is my email that I have sent. And that kind of culture is what makes entrepreneurship very different. And this is not, we are not really used to as youngsters when we are in a very competitive environment like a school. The maxim we heard is nobody's going to help you, you're going to be on your own. This is a very different environment. You will have a lot of people taking out time. Our first business plan was put together by a gentleman who also ended up becoming an angel investor. He took out time, he bought us lunch, he bought us beer, and he actually sat across the table and helped us run it. And that is the first understanding of how a PNL and business the balance sheet not work. And these are some of the aspects in which we need to shift it. From a government standpoint, if there is so Invest India is doing a lot of things in that direction. DST has formalized the IDC news and IDC processes. So a lot of things are happening in a particular direction, but information being made accessible in an easy searchable format makes a lot of difference. And that's a direction in which I would like to point that more, Rajiv, from a government intervention or impact standpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sijo. I think that was directly from the horse's mouth. It's very inspiring for the youngsters, especially that an angel investor can get you beer. That is truly going to motivate a lot of them.
I'll just give you one small anecdote also. Our first investment happened in our own company, right? This was back in 2005, 2006. We were still in college. Our first investment into a company happened when my co-founders were still in second and third years. And that was an 80 lakh investment that happened through an individual angel investor. And the most heartening part of the story is that he came back and said that he didn't understand anything about technology. He really wanted to help and back us, and that's why he decided to come on board and become an angel investor. And if I have to place on record, the extent to which he has really helped us in shaping our business thinking has been very immense. And that's a positive note again I want to leave that with. Over to you,
Yeah,
Janice and Raj.
very positive that there are good people around. Anyway, we've heard from the industry and entrepreneurship perspective. I think when we talk about the triple helix model of innovation, we have the university and the government as the two other key stakeholders. And we have Professor Saiyed and, of course, from Niti Aayog, we have Dr. Ayesha. Now, I would pose this question to both of you. Probably we'll go with Professor Saiyed first. The question is from Dr. Asad Saher. He's saying, what are the opportunities to expose research scholars in science and engineering to entrepreneurship, and how can we make it more effective? So I would start with you, Professor Saiyed. Your thoughts on this?
Thank you. If I may take liberty to possibly very briefly respond to the previous question, which is a very important one from Mr. Rajiv. How do we build and sustain and foster startups or innovation from academia? I just wanted to add, and I raised hand for that, but very quickly, just to add to that, that's going to be one of the most crucial aspect of policy if we were to do it, because that's where the knowledge is coming from. That's where a long-term knowledge is coming from. Innovation is primarily putting information and knowledge together, but the knowledge has to come from academics and fundamental researchers to actually build that. And that's a very crucial aspect. What has happened over the years is that because of emergence of many funding agencies and their support, there has been a good support at the early stage. So there has been many schemes, and I do not want to go into that, but just broadly, there have been many schemes to support early ideas. What has been important, and I would leave with that aspect, the lacuna right now in the system is that once a deep science-based risky ideas passes the proof of concept and requires a larger investment support, I think that's where the gap is, and that's where the government should actually see how they can come in for risky ideas where private investors are not going to come in. So I just wanted to add that we have to focus on that sector, build that, and build it forward. So thanks for allowing me to say that. Now I'll come to the question which was asked: how researchers can be possibly exposed to the the world of entrepreneurship and so on. If I got the question right, I would say that there are several opportunities for that, and this actually begins from even student level entrepreneurship that is being done in many fields, including in biology. There are several schemes. Of course, AIM has something which Ayesha actually leads, called Atal Tinkering Labs, which is a phenomenal examples of how you can inculcate scientific and hence innovation-oriented mindset for students. Then you have early stage PhD level entrepreneurship competitions around. You have master's level entrepreneurship competition around. You have then after that you have now academia can be funded for entrepreneurship research. Our government academic researchers are allowed to build startups, take a stake, equity in startups, and so on. So there's a lot of opportunity. Of course, one has to work hard and actually build your own plate rather than getting a plate from somewhere. What could be added to that is the researchers' exposure to actually good industrial standard working relations. I think that is something is not very majorly built. There is a summer internship. There is some other aspects of things which are there, but academic researchers, the professors, the PIs, and the researchers from the scientists from the industry, if they can spend a year in each other's environment, that is going to be very important, and that exposure could be very valuable. If we can build environment for an academic researcher, academic PI to take a sabbatical in industry, that would be lovely in India, and the other way around. That would be something very important. But just to summarize the answer for the question that you asked me, there are many schemes, and if need be, I'm happy to share the details of it. Do not want to take away time, I'm happy to share the detail with the person who has put in the query through my email ID or any other aspect. I'm happy to share that as well. But there are several skills for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Said. I would like to remind our viewers and those who are posting questions that we have a discussion forum on the Science Policy Forum. The website is www.thesciencepolicyforum.org, and a lot of discussion of this kind goes on. We had a few questions from there. Moving on, I would like to go ahead with Dr. Chaudhary. The question for you is the same question regarding how research scholars can get the experience of the industry. But since you're from the Niti Aayog, I would also like to add another question that's been posed here about the effectiveness of the Atal Innovation Mission. So if you could add that aspect as well, it would be good. Over to you.
So thank you so much. I think I'll begin by saying that, like Taslim mentioned, there are a couple of opportunities available here in India for different kinds of audiences, whether you start from the school students, you go to college students, or you even go to very specific scientific researchers, and even people who are in their early stages of corporate life. It's probably I guess the challenge in our case is that since there are so many government departments, everybody's trying to do everything. I believe that as an individual audience, I guess they get confused where to go, where to find the right information. So I think that is a fundamental problem at our level. And I think since I'm part of the government, I can take the blame for that. Yes, we probably as a government institution have not been really able to coordinate and collate all the different kinds of opportunities and variety of resources that we have in our network. And henceforth, what happens is that as an individual, one gets confused. But again, to name a few, what is already existing is, the different kinds of challenges that are launched these days. There are challenges which are launched either by specific ministries, which focus on how a particular social problem can be solved by using science and technology. So those challenges are pretty much open to the researchers, organizations. Then there are also challenges which are run by institutions like MHRD, Innovation Cell, or the Startup India, or even the Atal Innovation Mission for that matter. So where again, it's pretty broad and we work with different ministries and again see that how different science and technology solutions are provided and how they can actually be leveraged by the community. So these challenges, I guess the best part is that they provide you funding and they are again focused at different levels. Some of these challenges are focused at the idea level for people who are not very confident about their long-term journey and they just want to experiment the ideas that they have within themselves. Some challenges are also focused upon late stage product development, that where you have some technologies, you have some in vitro results in your laboratories. Now, how do you really convert that technology into a prototype and eventually into a product? So I guess there are opportunities. One will have to probably continue to keep exploring on these different government platforms and understand which one is most appropriate and right for you. And also because it is a very exhaustive exercise, one can go via the route of an incubator or an accelerator. In fact, in India, we now have roughly approximately 600 different incubators and also about 200 different accelerators. So these incubators and accelerators, if you just pick up based on your location, which incubator or accelerator is easy for you to access, what is their focus area, what is your interest area, and then based on that, they also help you to find out the right kind of programs that are being offered by the government. One very beautiful thing that has also started in the past couple of years is that some of these incubators are also now launching what they call as the Entrepreneur in Residence programs. So a lot of times, again, as researchers, we're not very sure of our ideas, of our technologies. So you can step out, you can do the 6 months sort of courses which are available with these incubators and see how do you again take your idea to a technology stage. And I guess one very significant point which also Taslim mentioned is there is a government provision which does allow scientists under specific institutions to have mobility, where these scientists can actually leave their institution, go to either an industry or go to another research institution and say work for a couple of months. So that provision is there, but I believe at present it does have a lot of constraints around it, that how do you ensure there is no conflict of interest, etc. So I guess, like I said earlier, the good part is that we are cognizant of all our shortcomings, and I guess that is where this policy is going to play a very significant role. And we will ensure that how we can allow more and more of structural flexibility, institutional flexibility, so that these researchers can be floating around between different institutions, and they can also go to various industries to get different kind of hands-on experiences. And coming back to your second point, that how the Atal Innovation Mission or Atal Tinkering Labs have made a significant impact, I'd say that we are trying to address two very broad kind of challenges with our programs at the NITI Aayog. One is all, of course, what we discussed, that how do we provide the opportunity to budding innovators and budding entrepreneurs? How do we facilitate them so that they can take their journey from a level to a higher level? And that's where the incubators play a significant role. That's where what we also have, the Atal New India Challenges play a significant role, where we work with ministry, we open up, we provide grants to innovators, to the young scientists, and they can come present their ideas to us. The second very, very important aspect is that how do you really create a critical mass in a country like India? We have billions of people, we have millions of children, but how do you really attract these children to the world of innovation, to the world of science and technology? And I think that is where the Atal Tinkering Labs are playing a very crucial role, because it's like a citizen science project where you really expose and introduce children to the world of new technologies, what we call as 21st century skill sets. You experience what is design thinking, what is critical thinking, what is collaboration, teamwork. These are all, traits which generally in our lifetime we experienced it only when we came to college or in the professional world. So that's where I guess we are trying our best to see how we provide these opportunities to children at a very young age within the school. And that's where the Atal Tinkering Labs are playing a very significant role. So I believe that it's going to be a good mix of how we inspire more and more children to come towards science, towards innovation. Then how do we really enable them to be able to convert their idea into an innovation? And then at the third level, how as government and industry, we help them to implement those innovations in the market. So it's going to be a mix of all these three. And like we said, there are opportunities, but one has to work a little harder because we have not been able to collate all of that. But hopefully in the next 1 or 2 years, we will be able to work at the back end and collate all of them together into one umbrella, so that it's not difficult for our innovators and researchers to look for those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, for a very brief answer to the queries. So now we have two queries, one from the pre-curated question and one coming from the live feed. So that I think more relates to Sijo's area of expertise and his ideas from startups and entrepreneurship. So, I mean, the first question I'll read out from the pre-curated question, that India being largely an informal economy has seen a spurt of informal based innovations to fight the current pandemic, whether it's homemade mask or you have like face shield, DIY things. So how can we galvanize this informal sector for entrepreneurship and innovation, which also relates to a question which comes from the live feed on the role of grassroots innovation, frugal innovation, informal innovation with respect to innovation and entrepreneurship, and how that can be seen positively in the light of STIP 2020. Over to you, Sijo.
Thanks, Rajiv. So, two directions of thought there. Yes, we are a very vibrant country, which actually creates a lot of ways to solve problems. We have monikers like we'll find a Jugaad way to solve it. So let's say that we are a very, very entrepreneurial country in that sense. That's the innovation aspect of it. Now, coming back to your question of translating that into more valuable, scalable, or galvanize the whole industry. There are two directions to look at it. One direction is to actually being able to formalize that knowledge, converting that into IP. And this is one area as a country we can actually progress a lot. Let's say if you look at MBTI as a tool, as a personality software personal development assessment tool, it was basically a research by two people, which is currently $100 million industry right now, right? So our ingenuity in creating a solution, translating that into IP is a bit of a skill, and that requires a lot of hand holding and support. That is the area where it needs to start becoming a focus. And one of the areas where, again, our university system in India has sort of probably slightly lagged or has been different in terms of the Western counterparts and things like that. Even institutions where I've been part of, the engagements with the communities around them to help them formalize, to provide them, maybe even converting them into patents and stuff like that. That structure is what is the one direction we want to look at it. We can look at the opposite way also, right? The same structure, which is if people are providing initiative, these universities or these students can actually do global research and find out some of the best research in that, and make sure that that adoption can be made by the young, or let's say enterprising individuals as well. So this is an area where one direction we have to start looking, and the broader term is technology commercialization, and it's basically converting into IP and figuring out a model to actually license that IP and create and convert it to royalty. And if you look at across sectors, this knowledge, this initiative is sort of missing. So today, if you look at the typical cycle of events, you do something innovative, and we get a social acknowledgement either as a media or a PR article, and that sort of is the end of it. But if we shift that by intervention, by a specific focus, of making sure that translates into a research paper, or preferably an IP, which others will have to license if it's an innovative model. And that is a direction, and that is where universities and institutions have to play a role to provide the capacity building, not only just teaching them IP, but even doing the facilitating role. Now, students can even do its own motor, right? They can actually pick up these projects and actually learn how to create IP. So this is one direction to look at it. The other direction to look at it, and this again is a cultural aspect which has to probably look at how do we intervene in India. There is a lot of literature which says there's something called as an E-myth of entrepreneurship, right? It's again a research literature. And basically they say that most entrepreneurs tend to work in their businesses as against work on their businesses. So the differentiating factor between innovation and entrepreneurship is actually, initially you'll start a self-employment of figuring out a particular model. Then the next phase is actually organization building. How do you create systems and practices and processes, bring in layers of management, which again requires a different set of skills, hand-holding, expertise. And the organization building is a keyword I would use there. And the research, where there's a lot of literature on the E-myth of entrepreneurship. And the standard that is most entrepreneurs end up working in their businesses. They replace the job with a self-employment as against working on their businesses, where they have to put together people and resources to create these outcomes. This is an area, again, we need a lot of specific capability building focus and capacity building and focus. We have done as a country a lot of good things on the part when we did it with entrepreneurs who are in the MSME or the SME field, when we helped in packaging material and finding them validation markets. But on the area of converting them into enterprises, of handholding them in that particular process, of the managing thing and managing layers there, that area we still have a lot to be desired for. And these are areas where institutions, education institutions all play a lot of roles. And in the process, create value for themselves as well, because at that point, genuine wealth creation also happens. So these were the two directions I would look at it. But as a starting activity, I would definitely focus on areas of converting that into patents. And patents, even if I don't really, end up, commercializing it, at a later point, any other entity can start picking up and I could potentially get loyalty with an innovator. So there are various roles different people play in the innovation value chain. And innovating a particular idea is probably, let's say, 2%, 5%, which is again the royalty value. And you need not be the same person to translate this. So that body of knowledge and the facilitation mechanism of translating that into IP and doing the commercialization bit is the direction I will look at it. And for those entrepreneurs who want to convert that into enterprises, organization building should be the focus and not creating innovative products and scenarios. I hope that answers the question in a directional way. Over to you, Rajiv and Janice.
Janice, over to you. Janice, you there?
So while we're waiting her, just as a point, I remember one of the pre-curated questions. There's another question similar to the farm economy also, right? How do we drive in more mechanization? Why is that not happening? It's all in the same direction. It's translating into IP, the initiatives. So you can see this parallels across sectors, but yes.
Janice, you there? I think there's some connection issue with at the end of Janice. So there are two questions I would take, and that I think kind of relate to the area from where Professor Said comes and from the academic institution. So the first, it comes from a curated question, is on, in the ideal situation, research should go hand in hand with innovation and entrepreneurship, but in India, you clearly see that there is a gap in this linkage. A strategy that needs to be followed so that research is truly industry driven. So this is the first question. And the second question, which kind of also relates with this question, comes from a live feed in YouTube, is that is it possible to encourage academia to provide grants to undergrad students in the range of 25 to 50K to promote innovation? There is money at the top and grassroots. So over to you, Professor Sayyed.
Good. So I successfully unmuted myself, so I can answer your question now. So I was just saying that I think I can take the both questions one by one. The first question being that how can the academic research be mostly industry driven, and India doesn't have the strong connect on that. I would actually possibly put a parallel thought on the question and say that there is a value both to have research being both understanding and curiosity driven and fundamental research, which actually gives you a wealth of knowledge, which you do not know how that would be for, eventually used. And that is, we have many examples of how good knowledge and understanding has afterwards resulted into something phenomenally useful. So I think a thought process that a research needs to be completely industry driven possibly needs a small correction and say that there is a strong value, very strong value in building fundamental research capability, which can be used further on by innovators as knowledge as a resource and take it forward. Yes, there can be many mission-driven, target-oriented researchers, which also has its own place in the larger scheme of research capabilities, and it should be both coexisting. But there is a very high value of building a fundamental research capabilities, which actually has across sectors have many examples of resulting into completely unexpected outcomes from that. So I just wanted to add that point. And India has had built into this, and we are seeing some results of that. Coming to the second question, and I did forget your second question. Sorry, what was the second question? You are muted.
The second question, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So the second question is a specific question from Dr. Asad Sahir, is posted through YouTube. He asked that, is it possible to encourage academia to provide grants to undergrad students in the range of 25 to 50K to promote innovation? There is money at the top and at grassroots.
I think it's a very good idea. I think that should be something could be done. At CCAM, we are thinking of building something of that sort. I think it's a fantastic idea where at the institutional level, forget about government, right? At the institutional level, you actually build some capability to support completely out of blue ideas that students want to run their own. This is actually one of the best kickoff for a creativity built thought process in students rather than a top-down research approach that they many times get. I think it's a fantastic idea. While government may look to build that and have a scheme, but again, you may not get hundreds of students. But if an institution, research environment, university build their own such capability, you can think of it. If each institution every year have 15 to 20 such students given their own personal ideas which are scientific and support for that, you can think of it how large the numbers would come out at the end, and the change of how thing would happen. It will be very, very exciting. I think one of the things that I benefited during my undergrad days at Xavier's, I think we actually had our third year, as on top we had the research component in the bachelor's itself. And that was our own idea that we built. They find money, and we do for a year in the evening 5 to 7 hours every day after our classes to research, and that inculcates really good amount of curiosity and research that is actually very, very useful. So I think it's a fantastic idea and a very good suggestion. It could be done at both government and at the institutional level. The major impact would happen if we actually get it at the institutional level. So I think it's a good idea. I would strongly support something like that.
Thank you, Dr. Said. I think closer on those lines, we have two questions from our live feed. One is again by Dr. Asad Sahib, who is talking about how do you encourage how do we encourage the society to leverage mass media effectively to convey scientific entrepreneurship stories? So he's talking about how basically we use science communication. And another from a parent, it looks very probably like a parent. How can we get little children to develop entrepreneurial mindset at a very early age? I think I would want Professor Said and Sijo both to address it. I think we can hear Sijo first on this. How do we get little children to develop the entrepreneurial mindset? A very concerned mother.
See, I think I'll start with a lot more, let's say, simpler suggestions. I will let them, this may not seem very, conventional. I will let them create YouTube channels to start with. So creating entrepreneurial skills is essentially allowing them to play around and tinker around. And if you look at the way a lot more younger people are doing it, they're playing around with content. If I take my niece, the amount of time she actually spends in creating one Instagram post, which may not look phenomenal from a science and technology angle of the lens when you look from it, but in that process, she's actually tinkering around with it. So at a starting point, I will definitely, really encourage to start playing around with media formats, and YouTube video creation is, a great way to start about it. There are three ways you can go about it. One is you can ask her to talk about or write about stories if that medium or some blogging channel works, of areas where he or she has interest in. So that's one way to go about it. The second way to go about it, if you don't want to, if you want some sort of structure, you can take the existing academic aspects she or he learns and translate that into short YouTube videos, short clips. Now, the reason I say that is, even if you look at literature, right, the concepts gets more and more clearer at a point where you actually start, recalling that aspect and try to teach others. That's where 90% recall happens. So if not for anything, that is the best way for your kid to also think of the concepts and make your mental models inside their head. But the third one is something I'll advocate. I picked it up from another friend of mine who actually did it with his child. It's been working out remarkable wonders. One thing he did was basically with his kid, every day the kid has to come up with 10 questions, and they do it together. They'll just list out the 10 questions. It doesn't matter whether the parent or anybody does not really have the answers to that, right? You list out 10 questions, and then over a weekend, when they have more time at the disposal, all the list of questions that they collected, they Google it, they search and try to find the answers together. This, the curiosity that you can ask questions, that you can actually find answers, reflect upon it, explore. This is the heart of scientific, let's say, inquiry and temperament. And that problem solving are
Sorry, I don't understand.
And that problem solving or search mindset is what you really need to inculcate. And when that happens, you also need to create an environment they can play around with it. And today, I can again say there are tons of small tools, right from a Raspberry Pi to an Arduino board. I can even suggest small channel. There's a channel called DIY Hacking, which presents a lot of small projects put together. I know the innovator who did it. He was a PhD student. He did it while he's in college. He just open source all his college projects, which turned it into a platform. So a lot of these platforms where you actually can start playing around with ideas and everything as well. There's a platform called Instructables. And the best part of these platforms is initially you can just mimic and replicate based on what is there. But as you mature, if you keep tweaks to that, you can keep submitting and start adding your innovation stuff to it. So try some of these initiatives and actually see how your kid responds to it. And I say this everywhere. I've read a lot of things about it. Curiosity precedes learning. So it's not what you should be supposed to learning. You should actually allow an environment for them to play around. And if it's a younger kid, they need a facilitated environment because they would not exactly know the boundaries or risks. So do it in a joint manner. You may not know answers, but try this one hack. Try the questions and try to start searching and try reading up the answers that come up with it and start having a discussion with your child. You do this practice over 6 weeks, 12 weeks, if possible a year. Maintain a journal, even as a blog or a YouTube channel with mom and when the kid is created together, you will see wonders. So I'm giving you a small hack to get there. I could go without going into the research part of it.
Very, very interesting, Sijo. I think we must stop telling curiosity killed the cat. The fear of curiosity actually killed the cat. So this also reminds our viewers that they need to ask more questions. And if we are not able to get through your questions this evening, we will always be able to find some forum to put across your question. So please do not hesitate and put down your questions either on our YouTube chat or also discuss it on our forum. Okay, moving on, the other part of the question, which I would like to address to Professor Saiyed, was as a society leveraging on mass media effectively to convey an entrepreneurial, to convey successful entrepreneurial stories? That's the question to you, Professor Saiyed.
Okay, thank you. So I think we are doing well. We have started to do well. I think story sharing, one is a storytelling, and I think story sharing is a very, very important aspect of conveying good things which happen. It can be used many ways. One positive way to do it is that when you actually see something happening well, how can you share with others so others actually take it as something that inspires them? They see that as a role model approaches and then build it forward. Because sometimes when things are not happening around you, you have a lot of not so positive thought process, and story sharing is, and build your own rock stars around you and share stories of those rock stars with the broad general public is a very important aspect. We have begun to do that. We need to do that more, including in our science and entrepreneurship, both ways. I think we actually, even in entrepreneurship and innovation, if I actually go back to the aspect of innovation, what we need to talk about more is the impact of innovation. While entrepreneurship has a lot of financial and economic impact, innovation's impact on society is phenomenal. And that is one of the best stories actually you can share with people. And the mass media can actually be one of the best vehicles to actually share that and take it to far away, across wherever you want to reach out, be it India or beyond. So I think we have begun to do that. We need to do it more, and we need to do it more where it connects with people. And I think that connecting dots of this with people will be very, very crucial. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Saiyed. I think that's very important that stories of successful entrepreneurs should reach us and reach the public also to inspire them. Speaking on that note, there is a question very interesting, and I would like to address it to Dr. Ayesha. This question is from a chartered accountant. One of the reasons for lesser women in agriculture is because of the lack of female-friendly agricultural machines. And I think this was also quoted in the Economic Survey 2020, that we do not have enough women in design, and that's why we do not have enough women around. Yeah, if Dr. Ayesha would like to reply to this query on why we do not have enough women-friendly equipments.
Sure, thanks, Janice. I think I'd like to maybe take a little philosophical approach towards answering the question. It's quite a challenging one, yes, of course. In general, I believe we see less participation of women when it comes to science, technology, and maybe a lot of other professions as well. So I guess in my mind, there are two parts to the solution. One half of the solution lies, I would say, with ourselves as women, and the other part lies with the other half of the population, which is our male colleagues. Yes, what we really need to do is that as women, we need to drive a mindset change within ourselves and believe in our capabilities. Technology is for everyone. It just does not come with a, sorry about that. I was saying that technology is for everyone. It does not come with any gender preference, I would say. And so the aspect is that as women, how do we break these gender stereotypes? How do we walk away from them? And how do we really start believing in ourselves? In fact, if I can just, highlight a little bit of the neuroscientific research, which has demonstrated that the human brain continues to evolve and learn even in the adult age, and that's what we call as brain plasticity. So women can also learn different new kinds of technologies, provided they start believing in themselves, they start embracing the right kind of mindset. I personally don't believe that there is something which an individual cannot do. It's all eventually at the end of the day about the right kind of mindset. But of course, yes, the other challenge that comes is, how do we really create that right kind of opportunity? And I guess that is where, like I said, part of the solution also lies with our environment, our ecosystem, and the remaining 50% of our population of our male colleagues. I guess that's where we have to be able to reward officials based on their performance and not based on their gender. So I think it's the philosophical mindset and the fundamental problem in the cultural approach. And that's where it comes in, and it's perceived as women are not able to make a mark in the technology, or they're not able to leverage or utilize a certain kind of technology in a particular sector. So I think it's, and one more thing that I feel is, somewhere we have also not been able to really portray women role models in India. And that is where, again, you see that young students in schools are not attracted to science, are not attracted to technology, because all around themselves, they don't find any women role models. But that's, again, having said that, I'd like to highlight one example. There's this very nice, interesting book that has been published by a scientific community called the India Bioscience, which the book is called Spurti, Celebrating Women in Science. So I think that really is a very good beginning. It provides role models to our young women. As a young student, if you see more women in science technology, then you will grow up with that mindset, then you will grow up with that philosophy, and you will really want to be able to explore science tech. And then I'm sure no survey, no report will come and say that, there are women who are not able to use a particular technology. So it's all at the end of the day about the environment and the mindset that you're able to build for yourself. So I think once we start transforming that, once we start putting more women into role models, we will definitely start seeing that change. And that is already beginning to happen. Like I said, there are good examples now, and we need to just amplify the outcomes and transform the perception towards science for women. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Chaudhary, for your insightful reply to those live questions and also what Janice had put. So now coming back to, again, it's a very interesting aspect to innovation and entrepreneurship about the notion of language. So we have two questions, and that I think relates again to Sijo's area of expertise about startups and all. So the first question comes from the curated question which we have. I'll read it. Again, and it has a reference to China. So in the case of China, homogeneity of language has worked in its favor. However, in the context of India, we have extreme diversity of language and culture. So in what ways you think language and culture play crucial roles in fostering innovation and entrepreneurship? And the next question, which kind of relate with this question, comes from the live feed, is posted by India. from YouTube. So that relates that how we can leverage the STI diaspora. So there's has been a lot of diaspora in United States, the Indian diaspora, or within Indian diaspora, there are different language speaking diaspora in the Silicon Valley. So how do you think diaspora can play a role in this? And especially there are schemes of DST like Vajra, whether they have been impactful of to not or not. Over to you, Sijo.
The second part of the question was diaspora. The first part of the question was importance of language and culture, correct?
Yes, yes.
Sounds good. So on the language and culture bit, I think, so I'll just probably just keep aside the China reference there. Every state or country has their own unique advantages. Maybe they have unified language, but we have multitudes of languages. From a thinking or opportunity standpoint, if I mention 2 points there. So one is, if you understand language as a way to see the world, if you have 25 languages, we have 25 different ways of understanding and questioning and comprehending the world. So that could be a different strength if you know how to leverage that. So that's one slightly philosophical angle I would probably take. But more critically, if I take a market opportunity right now, until very recently, the world was organized around, let's say, English for a large part, especially the digital world is organized around English. For the large part, because if you look at how the search and the typing tools and all, the keyboard is in English. But if you look at the way people type in India, almost all of them type in the native language is that they might be using English phonetic languages. Now, we were underserved by having such kind of equipments which enable typing a lot more easily. But a transition shift is happening in the way we engage with these technologies. It's voice and vision, right? Now, suddenly when it shifts to voice, the barrier of the typing tool goes away. We can talk directly, that's a natural medium of expression. And there'll be an explosion in regional content that is required across the world, not just in India, right? Now, that becomes a beautiful opportunity for us to really get on top of the knowledge of actually localization and creating those kinds of scenarios. So that's from a market opportunity standpoint. I would also want to stress the other standpoint where why language and culture plays a great role in encouraging even youngsters to come into it. Because we still think or perceive the world in a language. And one way to understand that is, let's say, our movies and everything, or let's say the trolls. I'm not sure how many of you in this particular room actually watch trolls and view trolls and everything. But if you look at the trolls across the memes across various colleges, schools, communities, states, geographies, languages, these are all subcultures on its own. And these subcultures can actually communicate way more at an emotional level that a neutral language or some language from a structural concept can't do that. So if you really want to encourage a lot more youngsters to come in, if you really want to inculcate that spirit of entrepreneurship, language and culture definitely has a role to play. Relatable role models, people from our own institutions, colleges. Relatable role models create belief. If people from my college could do it, from my school could do it, from my community could do it, I can also potentially do it. That belief system starts setting in from our neighborhoods and everything. And if you look at the way the India country is structured, language plays an all the more important role. And I think the same thing applies globally. So that's on the language part of it. How to leverage diaspora? I'll again say 2 points so that we remain pointed and we also want an actual way to look at it. A STI diaspora, science and technology diaspora, the best way to really leverage them is to get on board as angel mentors into our enterprises. They have actually been, most of them have been at the forefront of research. They harbor aspirations of coming back to India, wanting to help the country. And we have seen this trend again and again and again. One way to be able to do that systematically is to get them to become angel mentors in our startups, STI startups and stuff like that. Because they will actually bring in far more value than the amount of capital that they bring in. You'll still need some amount of capital for 2 reasons: for making sure they actually have skin in the game, that their interests also aligned. But most critically, when at a point of return, they also get to share, take a part of the return. So getting them on board as angel mentors is one of the best ways to leverage them and get them involved. And we have seen this phenomenon a lot. If you look at some of the angel investing activity or the profile of angel investors that has changed over the last 5 years, 6 years, you actually are seeing a lot more people, diaspora people turning into angel investors. And today, because of technology, because of digitalization, the reality is that I can actually start investing in Indian startups without essentially having to be based in India, because I can connect digitally, platforms are available to make it possible. So this has created a watershed movement. And one of the best ways to really, really tap into this is getting them as angel investors and angel members, even as board members and stuff like that. We have been fortunate to have a couple of such, celebrated Silicon Valley experts come on board as our board long time back. But today it's a lot more easy and possible. And government can also probably start facilitating the process from an advocacy level or even at a policy incentive level. And if you want to do relatable examples, BITS alumni is one of the powerhouse in terms of doing that. Raju Reddy has single-handedly rallied a lot of alumni to come back and say that we need to support students from BITS who actually come out with enterprises. And the extent to that I've interacted with him, he has a simple rule. If someone wants to set up a company from a startup from BITS, they should be able to get some funding and support from our institution. That is one way to look at it. But if you look at the other end of the spectrum, you need their ability to actually get mentoring also. So if you're not at a startup level, if you're at an early stage level, this is one of the interventions or programs we approach in our learning programs and Rethink. So what we do is we ask a student to reach out to one of your ST alumni, either as a review for the resume or generally understand the work, and host them over an FB Live in their own channel as well. So this facilitates a mentoring conversation. When we do structured programs, we do it over 4 weeks, 1 hour interactions, most likely around an activity of how they can review the activities. We can structure it around college projects, but most of our academic environments are very restrictive in terms of how you can do your projects. So I would not suggest doing that mentoring around the college projects. But if there are other avenues, so a simpler way would be starting with, let's say, a resume review, or generally understanding what my career progression should be, or even understanding what the career days looks like. So these are some ways to look at it. But if I were to take a single, biggest thing on that, make it institutional, I realize there is a very, very interesting program in Apple. If professionals in Apple take out time to mentor young talent in universities as part of recognized universities, for every hour one of their senior professionals spends, Apple contributes a particular portion as contribution toward university as a non-profit. So it's an institutionalized way of ensuring that people start spending mentoring time and everything. And this is the structure of knowledge-based industries. Unless and until we actually get time, mentoring time of people who have that knowledge, it's very difficult to increase. This is where the research, fellowships and internships and all come into picture. How do you systematically make those interactions happen? Informal, unstructured, at the same time, relationship building interactions happen is a key thing. Earlier, we had to organize physically, which was very difficult to engage the STI diaspora. But currently, we have a different opportunity. And if institution wants to take that format, you should start creating co-working equivalent spaces, business centers and institutions, and even in cities, because you need to be able to have environments that talk to the business world also. And IIT Madras has done some great work in that direction. They have set up a business center in Bangalore. And this is accessible to alumni to actually interact with people and everything. So there are models which we can look at even within the country. This is the direction I would want to point those thoughts to.
Yeah. Thank you, Sijo.
Over to you,
We have another similar question, and I would like to address this to Ayesha. Ayesha, with a huge population under the poverty line, that is the BPL section, how important is the focus to measure and understand the outcomes of innovation and its reach to the people with different business models? This is the question. I think we can also, you can touch upon how important it is to quantify innovation too. Yeah, over to you, Ayesha.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis, for the question. I think traditionally what has happened is that we have not been able to really identify the right kind of parameters of how to really measure the outcomes of innovation or the outcomes of the science and technology that we do. And I believe the second challenge that we have always faced is, given the vast demographics of India, We have been able to put together some very good, robust policies, frameworks, but we have not been able to really take it to the last mile. But having said that, again, what we are beginning to see now is that with the new technology revolution, with the digital technology reach being spread out so much, I believe now there are examples how we can see that the new technologies, the new support system, the new policies are able to reach the last mile. And when it comes to measurement of innovation, I believe what is very important is to be able to have a good digital framework to see that, okay, if I'm a government agency or I'm an institution, and let's say I want to really work on the problem of eradicating malaria, which is very prominent in India and also maybe specifically in the rural areas and the socioeconomically challenged setups. So now what happens is that one department will fund one solution on malaria. Similarly, you will have 5 or 10 other departments also funding solutions on malaria. So again, but the problem is that this end solution is not reaching our last mile. It's because, again, at our end, at the government level, these solutions are not talking to each other. And that is because we have not been able to leverage the technology in the best possible fashion. So I think the answer to all of that lies in the fact that how we really transform the way we measure innovation, the way we measure the outcomes of science. We have to look out for what is the impact that the various innovations are creating at the ground. We don't have to just look at, okay, how much money have I spent as an institution, as a government agency. What we really have to see that, okay, if I have invested, say, 5 crores in a project on malaria at 10 different institutions, what is the overall outcome that is coming from there? Are we really able to generate at least, say, 2 or 3 innovations, and are those 2 or 3 innovations implementing in the ground? Are the end users really able to benefit from that? So I think we are still evolving as a nation. We are evolving as institutions where we have we are still learning, how do we really translate and how do we really change our perception towards measuring innovation and ensuring that, the best goal or the best measurement success metrics is that if our innovation is actually solving a problem on the ground at the last mile. If that happens, yes, then is the right thing that we are doing as a government and we are able to really address the problem. And I guess what we're also developing is the skill set around the socio-economic assessment. We have not been able to really, again, measure that, okay, if we are adopting a particular technology which is either sophisticated or which is simple, how does it really create impact on our environment, on our community, on our society from the cost perspective? So I think those are the kind of things and skill sets which are now coming up, emerging as a society in ours. And that's how we are now building on that and ensuring that the policies that we develop are really able to be implemented at the last mile. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Chaudhary. So as we are nearing the end of our panel, so even though we have more questions from the live feed, and as Janice had said that we can take those questions in other platform in the Science Policy Forum. So I take one last question, and after that we have to end the session. So there's one question from the live feed and one pre-curated question. I'll club both the questions, and I think that this question is more relates to Professor Taslimarif Saiyed. So it's about how open science and innovation can help in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship when we have a market and monopoly based innovation, and especially how open science and open innovation can help in sustainable way of innovation and entrepreneurship, where we have things like sustainable development goals and taking care of environment and things like that. Over to you, Professor.
Sure. No, thank you. I think it's a very good question, a very thought-provoking question. I think for me, the question is like, would you look at open access and open source approach in terms of the science and innovation, and how does it compare to how people look at the intellectual property driven and protection driven innovation? I think I would say that open source or open access science is a very, very important, and this initiative has been attempted now even for journals to allow people to see outcomes of science. I don't know whether you know, but I must take 1 minute to share the excitement how initially when science was being, a scientist would actually accomplish a study and has an interesting outcome. These are hundreds of years back. The way I have seen in literature is that they would go in the center of the town, go to a small rock, go on top of it, and either explain it or demonstrate it. It was as good in terms of the way to connect and tell the story to the people. And this slowly has taken an approach where science is being published and patents are being, being protected and so on. Coming to that, I think patents allow people to build a long-term business perspective, which is also very important. And the science as a whole, it being open access, being published, is another aspect that actually has its very important place in terms of the pushing it and making sure that it is available for anyone to read what kind of science happens. And actually, funders are ensuring that in many places that the science, where whoever actually uses their fund, the science become open access as much as possible. In terms of innovation, people have attempted open source innovations at many places, and it continues to do so. For many places where there are not many funders and not many long-term investments happening because of whatever reasons. And I think that is very interesting model where we could say that a lot of open source innovation, open access to innovations, how it could come together, where possibly government and other aspects, not necessarily private investment, which looks at the return, but other people can come together and build it. And I think it has its very important place. Like in India, let's say there are neglected diseases, there are rare diseases, there are diseases which do not have financial returns to the investors like pharmas or other companies. I think this is a place where open source innovation should take a plunge and I think build it with philanthropic funding, with government funding, with the institutional environment, with the industry which wants to build it. And I think there was an attempt called OSDD in India, and which actually had a very strong pillars of building something together. It is a huge value approach initiative. I think we should attempt it, where we will find that private investors will not come because of whatever reasons. And I think this is where we have to combine assets from different places, make it open source, and take it forward. I think there's a value in it. I think one could attempt it in places where otherwise it's going to be difficult to actually leverage funding from private parties because of lack of return in such disease models in healthcare or any other areas per se. So I think open source is a fantastic approach in terms of both science access as well as innovation per se. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And in order to close this session on a high, we will play a small little game. We have three representatives. I would consider Sijo from the industry, Professor, since you have the title of Professor from the academia, and we have Ayesha from the government. So we will start with Sijo. Sijo, what would you like the academia to do in terms of encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship?
Open up more cafe sort of areas where people can interact with full Wi-Fi access.
Wonderful. To you, Professor, what would you like the government to do in terms of encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship?
I'm just checking I'm not on mute, but I think government is doing good stuff, to be honest. I think this initiative is a good example of it.